All right, welcome everybody. We'll give folks a minute here to get settled and then we'll get started. Let people log in. All right, people are clicking in, finding their mute, unmute buttons in the world of Zoom that we now live in. All right, I think we've got critical mass here. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar, Accelerating Equity in Electric Vehicle Adoption. So pleased that you can join us for this very important discussion on how we improve access for low-income residents in California and beyond to electric vehicles as a transformative climate fighting technology. My name is Ethan Elkind. I am the director of the climate program at UC Berkeley Law School Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment, otherwise known as CLEE. And we have been working on this initiative that gave rise to this report since 2009 as a partnership with UCLA School of Law and the Emmett Institute on Climate Change and the Environment there. So this report comes out of that longstanding partnership. And just so you know, in terms of this webinar, for our format, we're going to provide some opening welcoming remarks for all of you. We're going to then provide a summary of key findings from our recent report that gave rise to this webinar. That report is called Driving Equity: Policy Solutions to Accelerate Electric Vehicle Adoption in Lower Income Communities. So you'll hear from my colleagues on that. And then we'll launch into our panel discussion. And we've got some great speakers here today, including Commissioner Patty Monahan from the California Energy Commission, Jesse Denver from East Bay Community Energy, and Paul Francis from KIGT. So I'll introduce them after we go through the report, and then we'll have time for a moderated Q&A and to hear from all of you if you have questions once our panel gets started. So with that, I want to pass the baton over to Rich Brown, who is the Senior Vice President in the Global Environmental Group for Bank of America. Bank of America has been a longstanding supporter of this initiative, helped start it with us back in 2009, this collaboration among the law schools. It's the Climate Change and Business Research Initiative. And I'll just say before Rich gets a chance to speak, that you can see all the reports that Bank of America has helped sponsor in the series at the website climatepolicysolutions.org. That's right, climatepolicysolutions.org. We were pretty amazed we could get that URL, but I guess we're the main shop in town if you want climate policy solutions. So check out that website. And thank you, Rich, and all your colleagues at the bank for your support. So I'll pass it over to you.
Rich, you're muted.
Looks like don't have Rich's audio.
Yeah,
okay, there we go. You would think I would have it down by now, but at any rate, I'm going to keep this very brief, but I just wanted to say it is a real pleasure to be a part of this partnership because it has been so effective, because it's driven a lot of really great solutions that have been adopted by policymakers at various levels throughout the state of California and certainly beyond California as well, given the state's leadership on climate. I often get asked, why is Bank of America involved? We're involved because we have as one of our primary business missions to help scale the solutions to reduce greenhouse gases. And certainly when it comes to transportation, we need to expand the demographics of who can have access to electric vehicles. And it's a very similar challenge to what we have to who has access to clean energy. And we've got to expand those demographics as well. You know, one of the issues that gets raised in this report is access to charging infrastructure. In just a little bit of breaking news, Bank of America announced just today that we will be expanding the number of charging stations at our banking centers. We're going to double that over the next 18 months. So by the end of 2023, we will have more than 350 chargers at over 90 financial centers. Now, not all of these are in California, but many of them are, given the state's leadership role and the large number of electric vehicle owners that California has. So this is all part of a $1 trillion commitment that Bank of America has made over the next 10 years to address the transition in energy, in transportation, in industrial sectors, all these things that are going on to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have committed $1 trillion between up until 2030. So what that tells us is there's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of emerging technologies, and we want to be there as part of the financing solution for those. So with that, Ethan, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Rich. It's great to hear about the workplace and the bank retail chargers available, because that is a big part of the solution for those who don't have a charging spot at home in particular, which definitely for a lot of the low-income population who are renting or live in a multifamily building that don't have access. So that's a big part of the report that we talk about, that access to infrastructure and electric vehicle charging. And thank you also to the bank again and to Rich for your support on this topic and on this initiative in general. So let's launch into it. I want to introduce my colleagues, Ted Lamb, who's a senior research fellow in the climate program, and Katie Siegel, who's our climate and ocean research fellow here at CLEE. They helped co-author this report and will provide some of the highlights from it. So we'll hear from them and then we'll launch into our panel. So Katie and Ted, take it away.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks everyone for joining. So Katie and I are just going to provide a very quick overview of the report that Ethan mentioned at the top of the hour. Before we do so, I just want to quickly note that we have not changed the name of Jesse's organization to East Bay Community Energy, though we like to think that they are perhaps making things easier for their customers. It is East Bay Community Energy, so I apologize for that. So our report, Driving Equity, just a brief overview of some of the background of the California's program to date in trying to increase adoption of electric vehicles. Transportation accounts for half of California's greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very car-dependent culture, as we all know. And so vehicle electrification has been a key component of the state's climate program. And this goes back to multiple executive orders from Governors Brown and Newsom over the years, launching zero-emission vehicle and electric vehicle programs. And then more recently, Governor Newsom committing the state to a 100% zero-emission vehicle transition by the year 2035, i.e. No more sales of new fossil fuel powered private vehicles. Just recently, the California Air Resources Board released their Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation, which sets a target to achieve that goal. And the state has rolled out a number of incentive and rebate programs, such as the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project and the Clean Cars for All program, to try to accelerate the adoption by getting the price of those vehicles down, to the point that in 2022, so far to date in new vehicles sold, EVs have had a 13% market share in the state, and 1 million total EVs have been sold in the past 10 years or so since California began these programs. That said, these are many higher priced vehicles. As we all know, plenty of Teslas in that vehicle population, and the result is a situation where the first adopters of these vehicles have been wealthier and higher income Californians, and lower income Californians face some challenges in accessing the vehicles.
Great, thanks, Ted. So now we're going to talk a bit about the vision that was outlined for what equity could look like in EV adoption. And before we jump in, it's really important to note that optimal EV deployment would coordinate with state and local goals around public transit and active transportation, which are all a really important component of this bigger puzzle around decarbonizing the transportation sector at large. But in California, there's quite a lot of car dependency. So we did focus on, asked the convening group to focus on a broad vision for equitable EV promotion. And we're going to highlight a few of the key themes that emerged here. So participants explained the need to prioritize community-based organizations and really center local stakeholder needs and respond to the unique needs of communities. There's also was a call to fund charging infrastructure with community planning. There's a greater need for installing abundant public direct current fast charging. And there are also needs for, as I alluded to, incorporating alternatives to private vehicle ownership. This could look like a car sharing program. There have been some pilot programs that exist that allow folks to do kind of ride sharing, but with a community-led structure. That's just one example. There's also a need to ensure the durability of these vehicles and their batteries, as there's quite a risk of contributing to waste and just short lives of the cars themselves, which would not be within the goals of our climate and environmental needs. And there's also a need for a more abundant electrical grid capacity to support chargers in some places. We heard from certain examples that the infrastructure just isn't there right now to really build out the number of chargers that are needed for this transition. And so there has to be coordination across local and community groups to coordinate with utilities and with state agencies to make sure that this transition can take place. There was also some discussion around workforce development and just transition, especially for fossil fuel workers, but also ensuring that there are workforce opportunities within the lower income communities where this transition is taking place. I'll turn it back over to you, Ted.
So some of the barriers that our participant and stakeholder group identified to achieving that vision include, of course, number one, high vehicle cost and a lack of available financing. And this is in part because there are not that many vehicle models yet available, and those that are available are being offered at high premiums and high costs. Those costs will come down, but the upfront cost of an EV is still relatively high compared to many lower cost and used internal combustion vehicles currently on the market. The second major barrier is limited, affordable, and convenient charging. This is particularly an issue for residents of multifamily properties that do not have dedicated parking spots or that have a difficult time installing charging on a one-to-one basis. So a major barrier for uptake of electric vehicles. And third is limited marketing of EVs to a wide range of residents in California. EVs are often marketed as a luxury type vehicle, and that needs to change if every resident of the state is going to make this transition. Kate?
Great. And so in response to the barriers that Ted just outlined, we provide some solutions, and I highly encourage you to look at the report for a full set of solutions to all of the barriers, but we just highlight a few here so you can get a flavor of what we're talking about. So the first solution is potentially a vehicle buyback program that would be based on mileage and manufacture date. This would allow high mileage cars or older cars to be kind of recycled through. And also there are opportunities for all drivers, but especially lower income drivers, to choose a used electric vehicle, and making sure that there are used electric vehicles that are good quality and provide the same benefits available on the used market. There's also the potential for a subsidized charging payment card, and this would allow people to be better able to afford charging around their community. As we all know, fuel costs are extremely high right now. So the benefit of having an EV at the moment is also quite high, but there is still a cost barrier for accessing electric charging, though it might not be as high as current gasoline prices. And then finally, it's really important to fund community-based organizations for outreach and education. These organizations are at the heart of the community. They know the community. They have mutual trust with the community. And these are the best positioned actors to really allow for communication and outreach and hands-on experiences, getting folks to drive the vehicles themselves, understanding what maintenance and repair looks like. And these are a really important component of the overall puzzle. So with that, I think we can move to the next slide, and I'll turn it back over to you, Ted.
Thanks, Katie. And Ethan, would you like to bring it now to our panel?
Yeah, no, thank you both, Ted and Katie, for the summary of that report. And that really was just a bit of a teaser. There's a lot more in there, so I encourage you to check out the report. You can find it on the CLEE website, clee.berkeley.edu. Emmett Institute at UCLA, our partner on the project, also, I believe, has posted it. And then, of course, climatepolicysolutions.org. So thank you both for summarizing some of the key points there. And now let's launch into our panel. Before I'll introduce them sequentially, give them a moment to provide some opening comments. But I just want to let all of you viewers know that you can use the Q&A function if you have any questions during the presentation, and we'll do our best to relay those questions to the speakers. So please do use Q&A. I know some people use the chat, but Q&A is a lot easier for us to handle those questions. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker. We're so pleased that Commissioner Patty Monahan from the Energy Commission can join us. It's actually her idea for us to tackle this project, so this topic. So we'll credit you, Commissioner Monahan, for that. She was appointed in April 2019 by Governor Newsom to the Energy Commission, where she serves in the science and engineering position. And she is the lead commissioner on transportation for the commission, responsible for all their investments and possible for the lead on investments and policy for things like electric vehicles. And maybe perhaps most importantly for this conversation, she's a Cal Bear, having graduated from Berkeley. So Commissioner Monahan, over to you.
I like that little Cal Bear reference. Thanks so much, Ethan, and thanks to you and your team for doing this report. And full disclosure, I was one of the people that participated in it, so I have a vested interest, I guess, in some of the recommendations. So as Ethan said, maybe I should just give a little background about the Energy Commission, but we are invested in helping California meet its goals for zero emission transportation, as well as clean energy broadly. And our role is really specific to the infrastructure side. The Air Resources Board, our sister agency, is responsible for the vehicle side. So I'm not really going to touch on the recommendations that the report makes on vehicles. That's really not my sweet spot, but I will talk more about the infrastructure side. And I would argue that infrastructure is our biggest barrier when it comes to making sure that everybody can get access to the benefits of electric vehicles. And this is particularly true if you're a lower income family living in an apartment building or living in a dwelling that you're renting, because you don't have the infrastructure to refuel your vehicle. And I gotta say, DC fast charging is great for a lot of applications, but day after day after day, if you're doing that, it's not good for your battery. And it's much better for your battery. It's much better for the grid if you charge at night, overnight. You pay lower electricity prices and it's convenient. But to do that, we have to make sure that it's really accessible to get charging infrastructure in places that are convenient for people who rent or people who live in apartment buildings. And I want to say we don't have all the solutions for how to do that. It can be really expensive to retrofit an old building to provide that access. So I think, DC fast charging has an important role to play. But if it's the only solution, then you're going to be paying gasoline-like prices. I really did like some of the recommendations that the report has made in terms of, let's make sure that if possible, there could be a charging payment card so that if you are a lower income family, you do have to use DC fast charging, like some amount of funding so that you can charge up at a DC fast charger and you're not paying gasoline-like prices. I mean, kind of what's the point to if we want to provide benefits to lower income families, we don't want just the rich families who have their own garage to be able to access the lower electricity prices that you get by charging overnight. So that idea, like we need to make it easy for lower income families to charge up is so important. The single charging app, I do love that idea. I think it's one we're going to further explore how to make that come to fruition. I mean, ideally, you would just go to a single app. It would tell you like where the charger is and how much it costs to refuel, and you would really have a good understanding of what you were getting yourself into before you even got to the charger. The idea that we can use electric vehicles to support our clean grid goals is really important. If people come home and they charge up at 5 o'clock, right when we need it for just people coming home from work, that's bad for the grid. We already have reliability challenges. Like we want to do this in a way where you're charging up, ideally with renewable energy in the middle of the day when we are otherwise curtailing. Wouldn't it be great to run your vehicle on sunshine and get low electricity prices? So that's a combination of the Public Utilities Commission, setting the right signals so that you charge when we have a lot of renewable energy on the grid, and you don't charge when we don't have a lot of renewable energy on the grid. And I think, some of the investments to make sure that we're pairing, especially DC fast charging with storage, is really important. And we're seeing some of the providers like Electrify America say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to get renewable energy to provide the electricity for those chargers as well. So we at the Energy Commission take this responsibility extremely seriously. We want to make sure that this is a transition that works for everybody. And I just wanted to say a few final points around how California is investing in infrastructure. So usually we have about $100 million per year that we've increasingly been focused on zero emission vehicle infrastructure. Last year, the governor and the legislature gave us $1.165 billion for that program over several years. This year, the governor is proposing $2 billion. And we don't know what the legislature is going to say. This process is ongoing, but we're very hopeful. And we've made a commitment that at least 50% of the funding that we allocate is going to go towards lower income, disadvantaged, rural, and tribal communities. Our analysis indicates that especially rural, lower income, and disadvantaged communities don't have equitable access to chargers right now. So that's a big focus. We need to make sure that, just the data says like how that public access is equitable. And arguably you might need even more chargers in rural, disadvantaged, or lower income communities because of you may not be able to charge at home. So those are considerations that we're making right now in our grant making. We have funded a couple of programs like this. One is called REACH, Reliable, Equitable, and Accessible Charging for Multifamily Housing. We allocated over $26 million in that to demonstrate business and technology models that can scale for multifamily housing. So I can talk forever on charging infrastructure, but I'm going to curtail my own instincts and just stop there and just say, I want to congratulate the UCB team. I'm really looking forward to the comments and the questions, and we're trying to figure out how to operationalize some of the recommendations.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Monahan. That's a really helpful overview of the work that you're doing and the priorities. I'm glad to hear that some of the recommendations in the report are something you can consider putting into action. That's great to hear. So let's go to our next panelist. That's Jesse Denver, who is a Senior Distributed Energy Resources Manager at East Bay Community Energy, which is the community choice aggregation for much of the East Bay here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Jesse's priority initiatives includes EBC's electric mobility strategy. Prior to that, she served as the City of San Francisco's Distributed Energy Resources Program Manager, and where she worked on some of the reports that we put out in the past from that position. So speaking from multiple hats, municipally speaking. So Jesse, take it away.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for inviting me to join this webinar and for the background on EBCE. We are a public agency structured as a joint power authority and the default load serving entity in Alameda County and the city of Tracy in neighboring San Joaquin County. And our JPA is actually governed by a 15-member board of directors that consists of elected officials from each of the JPA member communities. And today, EBCE, we serve the electricity needs of over 60,000 commercial and industrial customer accounts, which includes multifamily housing properties. And we serve all residential accounts representing about 1.7 million people in the East Bay. So a little bit of background there about us. And in addition to procuring power for our customers, we're also tasked with development and management of energy-related climate programs, including transportation electrification initiatives that really help our JPA member cities achieve local and state GHG reduction goals faster. And over the last few years, we, EBCE and the team, we've conducted a detailed analysis to really understand at-home charging access and identified some critical disparities that will really hinder widespread EV adoption and therefore the ability to achieve California's zero-emission vehicle goals. And what that analysis found was that 47%, or almost half, of our residential population are renters in Alameda County, and that 90% of all the multifamily housing properties with 5 or more units are 50 years old or older. And finally, to date, that there's been essentially no EV adoption among renters in multifamily housing. So some takeaways from that analysis is that due to the vintage of the multifamily housing stock in Alameda County, electrical capacity upgrades will really be necessary across this building portfolio to support EV charging. And those upgrades are generally the responsibility of the property owners to fund and coordinate, and not the tenants, which is a key barrier to even deploying level 1 and or level 2 charging to enable at-home charging for these residents at scale. And it's unlikely that those upgrades would happen quickly at the scale needed, again, to meet the state's goals. So in turn, EBCE, we've come up with some strategic priorities and really are focusing our investments that provide charging infrastructure to the half of our community that don't have access today, renters. And this is really to ensure that all residents can join in the benefits of the transition to EVs. So we're doing this on 2 fronts. The first is in partnership with the California Energy Commission, we co-funded a Cal EVIP incentive program, the Alameda County Incentive Project. And that was a $17.3 million incentive project that we launched in December for level 2 and DC fast charging funding. And in shaping the requirements for our project, we took the data analysis that we did and shared that with CEC staff to really try to say, all right, we know where charging infrastructure is most needed and where there's going to be some barriers. So we allocated incentives for level 2 charging in multifamily properties, where multifamily properties are actually able to install charging infrastructure. And we also allocated some dollars, some separate dollars, to provide technical assistance specifically to our multifamily affordable housing providers to help them get ready to apply for Cal EVIP incentives if they were able to install charging infrastructure at their properties. And we helped them identify which properties that would be a good fit for. The other thing that we did was we carved out half of the DC fast charging bucket of funding to be required for projects that are in what EBCE calls our multifamily housing hotspots. So we actually mapped all of our multifamily housing properties of 5 or more units and created a heat map. So it really shows us on a square mile basis where we have the densest amount of multifamily housing units. And then that way, fast charging developers can find not multifamily properties, but nearby retail establishments and other applicable locations where DC fast charging can be installed that is near multifamily housing, so that people who are renters have convenient access to this charging infrastructure. So half of the incentives had to go into those areas. And we actually have a multifamily housing hotspot map up on our Alameda County Incentive Project website if you'd like to see where those areas are. The other thing that we did was we shared with the California Energy Commission that affordable housing properties are not exclusively located in disadvantaged and low-income geographic boundaries. We have in our service territory affordable multifamily housing properties that inherently serve low-income residents who are income eligible to live in those properties everywhere, and including outside of disadvantaged and low-income boundaries, geographic boundaries. And so we wanted to make sure that the adders through Cal EVIP for level 2 incentives that are earmarked for multifamily properties in disadvantaged communities were actually available to all multifamily properties who are affordable multifamily properties serving low-income residents. And so they've actually made that change for future kind of Cal EVIP version 2.0 programs as well. So that was really great. And then finally, we're using the multifamily hotspot map and kind of approach that we developed to deploy an EVCE owned network of DC fast charging hubs that we will own and operate. And so these will all be located in our multifamily housing hotspots and located at our Joint Power Authority member cities, municipal parking lots and garages. And we're coordinating with our city partners now on that. And 2 of our projects were actually proposed for award through the REACH grant funding that Commissioner Monahan just noted. So thank you for that. And we're excited to develop those projects. So happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse. Wonderful to hear about the approach that EVCE is taking, and particularly with the mapping the hotspots. I think that's a really sound way, policy perspective, investment perspective. So hopefully some lessons learned there for other CCAs, utilities, jurisdictions throughout California and beyond. Let me introduce our third speaker, last but not least, Paul Francis, who is the CEO and co-founder of KIGT, which is an electric vehicle supply equipment manufacturer, also created an operating software to go along with that. Paul founded KIGT in 2009, and in addition to that work, he serves on the board of South LA's Victory Community Foundation and on a subcommittee of the California Energy Commission's CalSeed Fund, our sort of in-state incubator for emerging technology and other clean technology, and among other commitments as well. And with that, I want to welcome Paul to the panel.
Thanks, Ethan. And I appreciate the time and the opportunity to share space with everyone on this, prestigious panel. When you look at the work everyone's doing for electric vehicles and EV charging, it's phenomenal that you're seeing the pace pick up and change happen with legislation and infrastructure and PUC ruling. So we're excited to be still in the business and scale up phase. So myself personally, I'm 3rd generation energy. Grandfather used to work for Westinghouse in Pennsylvania, lived in Wilmerdine, the town Westinghouse built for employees. Mother was with Edison for over 20 years on the customer service side. So for me, I got both ends from labor and service. When you look at what we're doing now, the reason we became a manufacturer, an OEM, original design with our own software platform, was because in the early days in 2010 and 2013, we were conducting pilot projects with cities and vehicle to grid demonstrations with the Port of LA and Long Beach. And our YouTube videos show our receipts that we were doing that work earlier, almost a decade ago. And what we found out was the infrastructure was not quite prepared for the influx of millions of vehicles. And so the initial model was to try to get fleets to transition over to electric, showing them that after recession of 2008, there's major savings when you don't have to pay for gasoline, maintenance. And we even demonstrated how one electric car can provide power for a building, 1/3 of the parking lot lights at a city fleet yard. So when I talk about working with AC Propulsion, that's the company that brought me into the business to understand how infrastructure works in the ebb and flow. So now fast forward, we're looking at how we do projects in untapped communities where that's where you're going to need the uptick of millions of people to participate in this EV future. For example, how I see it, everyone who has an electric car right now, they want one because they can afford one. The stylish ones are the ones that cost a little bit more. So when you're looking at equity, how do you get people encouraged about driving an EV if there also isn't charging in their communities? Some of the studies and reports we did with 501c3 and UCLA demonstrated EV charging deserts, specifically in the South LA region where we have projects. So when we're trying to figure out creative ways to make it happen, some of the barriers we're seeing are the permitting process, but we're encouraged by the funding that the CEC has and the state has now. We are seeing a transition slowly to directing and allocating funding towards untapped and underserved communities. But mainly how we see business models working are when you work with CBOs and faith-based organizations, they have the real estate required for infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, as a charging manufacturer, we need parking spaces. And with parking spaces, you need real estate. And some of these organizations own the most forever in their communities. Unfortunately, to get the process moving to upgrade their grid is going to take all of our work in new ways and, rather than traditional methods that we're used to. None of us in our lifetime has completely redesigned a grid or built a grid like the New Deal 100 years ago. So we're looking at collaborative efforts with gig economy and rideshare. Our company is really big now on level 2+ charging and providing that intermittent facility when instead of DC fast charging and having to upgrade the grid tremendously, and level 2 charging that's rather slower, that level 2+ is able to provide medium duty, gig economy, and a safer way to add resiliency instead of having South LA, Oakland, and Richmond have an overloaded grid when thousands of people are plugged in the middle of the summer. So what we're trying to figure out are solutions with the projects we've received grant funding for, kind of leveraging some of the Federal Energy Reserve Commission's legislation with V2G, demonstrating those projects and how that value can actually be leveraged in untapped communities for private companies to develop and invest if there's other sources of upside to generate income from. So when you look at the innovation piece, the Energy Commission is doing a fantastic job of supporting projects like that. We have one that we're conducting in the city of Ontario, where it's going to be in a disadvantaged community. Many of our projects are at universities, multifamily areas, and near convention or port areas, because we know that's where many people congregate. But mainly we want utilization. We understand the retail model works, but where a lot of people end up coming in and out in the future mobility and how we see it will be in these distinct areas where you'll need gig economy charging, people getting on-demand vehicles in disadvantaged communities like Envoy's business model, and having somewhere safe to charge at night rather than a 7-Eleven that I really don't want my daughter plugging in at after 10 p.m. Not saying anything's wrong with 7-Eleven. However, just having a space where there's other people charging, a nice watering hole in communities supported by microgrids so that you can support the future. So we're not adding completely new load of millions of EVs at one time. So when you're looking at our model now, fast forwarding to 2022, wherever we're putting charging in underserved communities, we're integrating microgrids, small storage with solar carports. Because when you connect it back to faith-based organizations, when there are blackouts or emergency response, including microgrids, including charging, you have resiliency hubs where people already feel comfortable to go just in case the lights go out or there's a climate disaster. So charging is more than just having people plug in at a convenient time, but it's also providing networking. Every smart charger, and a dirty little secret in the industry is a lot of our chargers don't work. And that's the truth of the matter because the networks aren't as strong enough to support 4G and 5G EV chargers. So wherever you go now and you see a Kidget project, especially with the one we were fortunate to partner with, one of the rideshare businesses, we're adding networks of 4G and 5G towers. So not only do we add access and affordability for clean charging, now we're providing access for networking and Wi-Fi capability. So as we see it, our entire model is reshaping 100 years of human habit, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Paul. Great to get your perspective on this as someone who's really literally in the trenches deploying this infrastructure. I want to open it up now for a Q&A session here. I've got a couple questions I want to pose to our speakers, but I see many members of our audience have already taken advantage of the Q&A function, but please do use that for questions. And I'll also encourage our speakers, if you want to type out any quick answers to some of these questions, feel free, as that function is available there. So please do send in those questions. But I'll start just a question for any of the three of you. It seems like one of the big challenges here, not just for chargers in lower income areas, but just in general, is a viable business model for the chargers. And you look at companies like Tesla that have had success, and they, as far as I can tell, see it as a bit of a loss leader to sell the vehicles. But this problem is obviously more acute in a lower income neighborhood potentially. So I'm just curious where the three of you would see a viable business model or a way to at least help defray the public investment costs, if there are some required to get the infrastructure scaled up that we need. So that's just open question. I don't know which one of the three of you would be best suited to answer, so feel free to jump in. Okay, Jesse. Jesse, then Paul.
Sure, thanks. I can jump in. You know, as I mentioned, as a nonprofit public agency and the load serving entity, we're reinvesting the revenue that we earn from the sale of electricity back into the community that we serve. And EBCE is starting to deploy these fast charging hubs that we will own and operate. We feel like we're going to be able to provide power charging as a service to customers at a rate that makes it comparable to gasoline or less than gasoline. And because we procure the power and we're able to actually provide 100% renewable energy to those assets, and we're partnering with our JPA member communities who are providing that real estate to us as site hosts for EBCE's charging infrastructure, which is a great public-public partnership. And the reason why the Joint Power Authority was formed is so that we can create these kinds of unique and innovative ways to help advance climate goals. We really feel like this model for us is going to work. And our goal is to scale this so that we have, you know, one of the densest networks of DC fast charging networks in the country in our service territory. So
great.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And I think it's a good reminder that, you know, the potential public agency revenue stream here. So let's see, Paul, you were going to speak, and then I'll let Patty weigh in on this.
Yeah, so business models, I think it's regarding strategic partnerships with the community leaders and stakeholders. So it's providing a revenue share upside, since the real estate is critical and they're in critical areas within the community. Rather than just say, we'll give you a stipend or one check, it's investing with them, providing the jobs from people within the congregation or people who work in the community, because it's green jobs, but it's also blue and white collar jobs. So when they're participating in the infrastructure or the maintenance side or the networking side, you have traditional businesses that can thrive, that have been doing so for years already. And so that's one way we see it. Then once it's installed in the ground, the owners of the property, the faith-based organization, that's a lease rental for them, for allowing us to put solar up. Now they have a revenue generating asset on their property that's appreciates the value of their land. And then when you talk about potentially some of them are allowing ride share or car share vehicles to be there, it's another source of revenue or utilization where you can take advantage of low carbon fuel credits. Rather than having a pay for charge, low carbon fuel credits are a great way to drive utilization, like what was suggested with discounted charging. When you have those models there at these sites where there's real estate and where people trust, I think you kind of get some encouragement and you start seeing some more uptick with usage.
Yeah, great point about the sort of co-benefits on the revenue side, Paul. Thanks for that. I'll let Patty weigh in last but not least on this, and then my colleague Ted will ask another question after this. Go ahead, Patty.
Well, I think Paul and Jesse gave some really great ideas for how to make this sustainable. I do see, you know, the faster the charge and the higher the utilization, of course, the quicker you get a business payoff. I want to emphasize, though, I think there are places where the market will never go. And there's going to be a role for public investment for years to come to make sure that everybody gets access to electric vehicles, because it's not, you know, retrofitting a building super expensive, like I said. And I just think we have to keep in mind that while in dense urban areas, you can probably figure out a business model. When it gets rural, it gets harder. And so those are just considerations as we go forward from a public policy perspective, that there may always be a place for public investments in this next decade of transition, or people will get left behind.
All right. Yeah, very much like post office or even electric utilities, the challenge of those outlying customers. All right, Ted, I'm going to pass it over to you for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Ethan. So one thing that came up in our report process is the combination of a need for local planning to identify where charging is most useful, but also a lot of local barriers in terms of permitting at the city level. And I'm just curious, and this touches on a few of the questions in the Q&A, if each of you could talk about what you think the role of city governments and local governments in particular is in the charging investment rollout to sort of deal with the tension between those two issues. Paul?
Yeah, we were fortunate to have a conversation today with a city utility and discussing strategic ways to partner, right? Some of the methods of how things were done because that's the way the grid was. It's very traditional methods. And one way we're seeing it is allowing more opportunity for jobs in the way that if you have lack of capacity for construction to upgrade power lines and for things of that nature, or frontline engineers who sign off on projects, we think adding more resources towards public agencies to potentially hire outside and bid out for these smaller private contracts can speed up the actual construction work. Now, when you're looking at permitting, you have AB 1236, and I think like how we do outreach for car sharing and how we do outreach to let people know there's new electric vehicles. I think having outreach in town halls or workshops with public agencies, letting them know AB 1236 is something viable that we can lean on, where it can help with having the permitting process go a lot more smooth and collaborative, because there's a lot of work that goes in once construction has to happen. And so permitting can be streamlined and we leverage AB 1236 better. I think you can see more results and more projects faster.
Great. Jesse, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to kind of piggyback on the AB 1236. You know, entities like EBCE were in a good position to be able to help coordinate all of the cities within a region to actually streamline their permitting processes. And that's something our team did in advance of launching our Cal EVIP project. And we're actually the first major urban area in the state of California to be fully streamlined. So all of our cities and the county, all the way out to Tracy in San Joaquin County, are streamlined with AB 1236. And EBCE, we provided that technical assistance and we acted as the facilitator between the GoBiz team and the cities and getting their ordinances and checklists and whatnot approved and signed off so that we can try to meet this goal of having everyone in compliance with AB 1236 by the time we launched Cal EVIP.
And Commissioner Monahan, anything you want to add from the state perspective on sort of leading from the top, but looking at the city angle?
Yeah, I was actually I was looking for the scorecard that the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has. I was going to, if you give me share screen privileges, I can show it. But basically, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has like a permitting Olympics to try to get all counties streamlined. And there was legislation passed last year that indicates if a locality doesn't pass a permit within a certain amount of time, it's automatically just passed for electric vehicle charging. So the state is really trying to do a lot to ensure that permits aren't a barrier. But I think, as you've heard, they still are, because even if it would just be better if the cities adopted the code that the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has really spelled out.
Great, thank you. And I think Katie is going to take the next question.
Yes, thanks. So for the next question, we're wondering, how should state and local leaders address the parallel goals of reducing private vehicle travel while promoting EV access, such as through car share models, while also ensuring that lower income communities have a variety of mobility options to meet their needs? I don't know, is anyone inclined to take that? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Monahan.
Well, I mean, transit buses are like in the front, like one of the early markets for electrification. In terms of the medium and heavy duty fleet, they are definitely the front runners, and there's rules on the books that they have to electrify from the California Air Resources Board. So I mean, I think we're seeing transit already going zero emission, and we're also, together with the Air Resources Board, really trying to support shared vehicle use, to give options. And that can include not just, your passenger car, but also electric bikes and scooters and all the different mobility options that we are seeing. I do think this is the hardest piece, is reducing what's called vehicle miles traveled. To me, that's just it's been a challenge. We haven't been very good at it at all. And, part of it is people have to get to work and they have to get to school, and the mobility options just aren't there. And now they're kind of afraid to take public transit, which is making it even harder.
Great, thanks. Paul, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, with the Energy Commission's CART, you saw a lot of different regions with the CART solicitation get projects awarded where you're going to see multiple type of models with car sharing and ride sharing. So I think what's going to come from that's exciting. Having to have a project where you're working with a car share or a ride share company, what you're getting in certain underserved communities is a value add for the future of gig. And we think by creating certain hubs in these areas for gig economy, because now with post-pandemic, we still get things delivered. Our team, our CTO, he doesn't own a car. It's more about reducing his carbon footprint. So he'll use Turo, he'll use Uber. And when you have Uber and Lyft committing to all electric by 2030, and you're having 40% of their rideshare trips start in disadvantaged communities, and 66% of their drivers are ethnic background. So we think it's critical by supporting the gig. We have the Olympics coming in 6 years. People from around the world are used to different mobility options like first and last mile and seeing electric. So I think as a state, we're excited as a business that there's funding for that, to see more rideshare, more strategic partnership, because I think that's the future with passenger EV. A lot of more community hubs where passengers can be involved in business models and earning from them, not just driving around to get to the grocery store.
Great, thanks. Really good points there. And Jesse, you want to go ahead and weigh in too?
Yeah, I'll just add on real quickly to Paul's point, is that the rideshare drivers that are operating on transportation network company platforms, their trips are originating from these areas that overlap with multifamily housing and our multifamily housing hotspots. And that's very likely. And so I think that there's, a good argument for making sure that we're directing investments in fast charging, which is going to be necessary for the drivers operating on those platforms, so that they can, not be offline too long from their job driving people, and get back on the road. That fast charging infrastructure is going to be necessary, convenient to not only where they live, but also where there's hotspots of where they're picking up and dropping off customers.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Well, one thing that we're trying out at one of our sites is a leapfrog model, where once your car is low, you can just switch cars at that same hub and continue going. I know battery displacement, and that's kind of the sizzle, and it's very innovative and cool, but it's expensive infrastructure at a site, and permitting for that is on another level. But when you have this car swap model, and you can have networks of these built out through major corridors, I think you're supporting the future of charging in that way, and the future of mobility.
Yeah, it's great to see innovation in that space too. I'm going to turn it back over to Ethan for our next set of questions.
Keep the tag team questions going here. So I'm going to try to combine a few questions that we've gotten from the audience into, I think, one theme, which is basically something that Commissioner Monahan mentioned at the outset, that a lot of these public charging stations are very expensive and even close to gas prices, and that the benefits of charging from home is much cheaper. So basically, the question is, how do we encourage more sort of at-home priced and style of charging for those who don't have a dedicated parking spot, maybe thinking through curbside charging, or just thinking about some of those challenges for multifamily buildings to upgrade panels, how to address that split incentive issue where the landlord owns the building and would be responsible for okaying the infrastructure investment, but it's the renter who would benefit from that. So maybe Commissioner Monahan, I'll start with you on that one.
I could unmute. I have too many screens. So I do think that this is not a one size fits all, and you have to do a site assessment and really evaluate from a site specific perspective what's going to work. And you need community planning. I mean, one of the things we've invested in, which I'm really hopeful we can do more of, is planning grants, because you've got to figure out, well, what are the mobility needs of the residents that live in a certain community and what's going to work best for them. Sometimes it'll be car sharing, sometimes it'll be on site, sometimes there's going to be solar plus storage paired nearby. And you have to do those site specific looks and plans to make sure it's really going to work for communities. And really it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, very, very challenging. Jesse, I want to pose that same question to you on the challenges of getting at-home style charging for multifamily residents and those without the ability to install.
Yeah, as I noted kind of in my opening comments, 90% of the multifamily building stock in Alameda County alone is 50 years old or older. And so in addition to all the traditional barriers like deeded parking spaces and who assumes the cost, there's just this electrical capacity upgrade barrier at the building level that is going to create delays in how we provide at-home charging infrastructure to renters. And so, going back to Patty's point around kind of local regional planning, that's really what EBCE did over the last couple of years, was looked at just our service territory rather than kind of a statewide lens of what could work, and said, what's happening just in our area? And how can we then work to shape the rules for the incentives that we're going to be co-funding with the CEC so that we can really deliver the biggest benefit to our community where it's most needed? And that's where we got the carve out for half of our DC fast charging incentive dollars to be in these multifamily hotspots, or to kind of change the rules around incentive adders for affordable multifamily properties to ensure that no matter where they're located, affordable property owners have access to that additional adder. And then, because there's so much need for this charging infrastructure and half of our population essentially are renters, we just need more kind of fast charging ports, and to be able to provide technical assistance to property owners who can install charging infrastructure at home for renters, to help them with the process of even getting to the point of installing it, because they don't know where to start. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And Paul, I'll give you the last crack at this question.
The EBC's hotspot map is really cool. I think that's a wonderful idea and tool that should be scaled and tried elsewhere, because as the developer model, right, we also have projects where we just own the assets. That helps to know that there's adjacent land and now it's more of a real estate play. And that's the other side of the business that often goes undermentioned when it comes to EV charging. But then HOAs, right? HOAs are communities where they own their home, but it's they make decisions together. And a lot of times we get inbound through the utility approved site that we're on, and they're asking us about how to get charging, the HOA approval. You have a committee of 5, and these are people who just are homeowners. And I think if there was a portal or HOA workshop, you would get a lot more charging there, because typically these are the people in my townhome community that drive Teslas. They have the EVs and they have the income, but they don't have the know-how or the expertise or where to go. So having an HOA portal separate from multifamily for property managers and owners, I think would be helpful.
Well, unfortunately, just 1 minute away from having to close up shop here. So just final quick seconds comments from, let's see, Commissioner Monahan, if there's anything you want to mention that we haven't touched on? Then we'll go to Jesse and Paul.
Well, I just appreciate this conversation, appreciate your work. And let's just say Energy Commission is laser focused on this. We need help. And so please do participate in our processes, help us spend the money wisely.
And Jesse, last word.
EBCE, we're doing a lot in our service territory and working hand in hand with our Joint Power Authority member cities to, accomplish the state and local goals that need to be achieved. So we're always interested in hearing other people's ideas and, moving forward with our strategic priorities in a collaborative way.
Great. And Paul, you get the ultimate last word.
Well, I like to always say, imagine a world where every morning you wake up and you have a full tank or full battery. And then when you leave work, you have a full battery. When you leave happy hour at the grocery store, you have a full battery. And that same car provided power for you and your family at home. I think that's the mission, the vision all of us are working towards. And it's exciting to see we're doing that together here. And, if you have a gas pump at your house, would you ever go to the gas station? And I think that's the goal we're trying to achieve here, is where we could put home fueling stations where people are living in the communities that deserve it. And so we're looking forward to being part of it.
Thank you. Well, glad all of you could be a part of this discussion. We didn't get to many of the great questions that came in, so we'll see if we can maybe address those offline and get back to those of you who wrote in with some really great questions. And I just want to thank all of you, the speakers here. We had Commissioner Monahan, Jesse Denver, and Paul Francis joining us. And also want to thank my co-authors on the report, Ted Lamb and Katie Siegel, who also helped moderate today's discussion. Again, if you want to get more info on this report, it's Driving Equity, Policy Solutions to Accelerate Electric Vehicle Adoption in Lower Income Communities, available at climatepolicysolutions.org or at clee.berkeley.edu. And I also want to thank our partners at UCLA and Bank of America and all of you for joining us. A lot more we could have touched on, so there's a lot more to do on this issue, but hopefully this covers most of the basics here. And I know there's a lot more work for the state ahead to make electric vehicles truly available for everyone. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.